Hello everyone, welcome you all for the webinar. Thanks for joining in. Today's topic for the webinar is Solve Test Automation Framework Challenges with Appium and TestNG. It will be a 1 hour session with 40 to 45 minutes of presentation followed by about 15 to 20 minutes of question and answers. So if you got any questions, please send them to us using the questions tab on GoToWebinar control panel. Hi, I am Anshuman Chatterjee. I'm a lead developer and automation architect at pCloudy, which is a part of a smart software testing solution. I have close to 7 years of experience. I have been involved in automation tool and framework creation as a developer. Moreover, I have been responsible for the creation of all the pCloudy plugins for third-party tools and integrations. So without spending any further time, let's move on to the agenda for today. Uh, so we will cover up a brief introduction about pCloudy, then the evaluation of a test framework and the challenges faced, introduction of TestNG framework, the best practices, configuring TestNG framework for multi-device execution, followed by a demo of integration with pCloudy for multi-device execution. So pCloudy is a part of smart software testing solution. So it is a mobile testing platform for developers as well as testers to enable them to test their applications on targeted region and specific smartphones across some major global networks. So pCloudy offers you 500 plus Android as well as iOS devices, and these devices are real mobile devices. So they lie in our data centers, which are across in Bangalore, India, then in California and US. We have our data centers in the Philippines and Australia, and some more data centers are coming in. So in the last few years, we have been able to grow our family of developers and testers to more than 7,000 from across the globe. And we have been recently published in Gartner as well for Market Guide for mobile app test automation and tools. Let's now jump on to the next slide. So I will start with a very basic formula for creation of everyone's my first automation script. This happens mostly when we are beginning with automation and we haven't have inherited a full-grown automation framework from our organization. So as automation testers, we get a crude requirement to automate a product, either from the product owner or maybe from the test managers. At the same time, we also hear some galactic stories about the empire of Selenium, the Milky Way of WebDriver, and about the Appium constellations. Of course, if the product or AUT is on mobile. We also hear about the existence of some commercial saviors like QTP, IBM's RFT, etc. etc. For days, no, sorry, we cannot afford days. Okay, for hours, we dream big about choosing an automation tool, learn it, then write some robust test cases, generate sexy reports, find some bugs in the product, and brag about it to the developers. Then we come back to a reality and start with stage one. So the driver script, and we add some tool, and we print the result in console. So here, the driver script is nothing but our public static void main, where we get an entry point for our code to begin. Here, we instantiate our tool, then open the application under test and do a few clicks and type text, print the outputs in console, and that's it. Then there comes some more requirements. So here in the stage one, we have our data, the test data is inside the driver script only. So we get some more requirements that, okay, separate the data from the scripts and capture the snapshots so that the developers can see the flow and the errors. Then we separate out the data and keep them in an XML or CSV or maybe in an XLS file. We now also need to find or develop a boilerplate code to read data from files. Luckily, capturing snapshots were not so difficult. So here comes our stage 2. So driver script plus data plus tool is equal to execution report plus a snapshot. So these are the two new things that we have added. So we we somewhat have a better framework, but that's not all. We still cannot brag about it. Now here comes some more requirements. So separate the object definitions from the scripts and capture logs as well, and create a good looking HTML report that can be shared with the management or the clients. Okay, so here comes our stage 3. So driver script plus data plus objects plus tool equal to some good looking HTML reports plus snapshots and logs. So this is the stage 3. So yeah, much better. So this looks much more promising than the previous two. At this point of time, it feels good to see your framework getting into shape. And yes, you can now brag a little about your achievement. But now comes some more requirements. So let us run the tests on different browsers or maybe mobile in parallel. So here come our stage 4. So we invoke multiple processes of the same automation code to run in parallel. So suppose till stage 3 we were running a single process for Google Chrome. Now in stage 4 we can give it the browser name as an input, and we can invoke 3 different Java processes to invoke it in Chrome, in Firefox, and in Internet Explorer in parallel. And now the problems. So problems in stage 3 and 4. First, creation and maintenance of data and object-driven framework and reporting and logging frameworks. So every process for in stage 4 for parallel executions consume memory. So what does this mean? So suppose a typical Java program, whatever program we have written, if that is consuming around 100 MBs of RAM, so when we are running the same program in parallel for 3 different browsers, so for 3 browsers, it is consuming like 300 MBs of RAM. So, and this figure grows drastically when we execute on multiple devices. So in Android, we have a huge fragmentation, and now the iOS devices are also coming up with the same, not same, in a similar fashion. So we have a large device fragmentation, their device versions, different manufacturers. So suppose we want to run in 10 different devices in parallel, so we are close to consuming 1 GB of RAM for the 10 Java processors. So this becomes a problem. Third is the consolidated reports are not achieved. We can only generate individual reports. So we can generate a report for Chrome, we can generate a report for IE, we can generate a report for Firefox, but we do not get a consolidated report because all of the three processes are running in parallel. So consolidating of reports before sending it to clients or the management, it is an added challenge. And when we are using multiple processes, so file handling, input output errors, while creating of log files, reports, and snapshots, that becomes messy. Believe me, I have been to that path, and we have to maintain different working directories and multiple things. So it becomes messy. So now introducing stage 5. So in place of multiple processes, now we need multiple threads in parallel of the same automation code. So this resolves number 1 and number 2, number and number 3. So what is the problems of a stage 5 then? Just a single problem most of the time. The framework code is not thread safe. So what does this mean? What does code not thread safe means? It means that the driver object and maybe many other things, or some local variables or some settings, some configurations, they are kept static, which means they can be accessed from anywhere inside your program without instantiating a class and are like shared variables. So a small example is you create a Firefox driver in one thread, then create a Chrome driver in another thread. The first thread keep the Firefox driver in a public static driver variable. So this particular variable is static and this is kept maybe in your main class. So the first thread, the Firefox driver thread, it keeps the Firefox driver in this driver variable, and the second thread, which has the Chrome driver object, it also keeps it in the same variables. Because it was a static variable, there was no need to instantiate a class, and it can be accessed from anywhere in a static manner, and thus it is not thread safe. So multiple threads are accessing the same static variable, and they are changing the values or making them null, and this becomes a problem. So as a result, in this example, my first Firefox driver object, that is lost because it has been replaced by the Chrome driver object of the second thread. So execution went well on Chrome, but for Firefox, only Firefox browser was launched and nothing else happened, because when the clicks and type text keywords came into place, my driver object was replaced. So this is what typically goes wrong in multi-threading concepts. When you don't use some other framework, you try to create your own framework. This is typically what goes wrong. So the long-term solution is to remove the static keyword from everywhere in your code. But it becomes a very big task as a driver object has now been used in numerous other places. So when you want to remove the driver object or remove the static keyword from the driver variable, so it gives like 300 plus errors in your whole project. What happens? So my framework is still not thread safe. So mostly the solution is, let's live with the problems of stage 4, the multiprocess thing. Thus, the concept of parallel testing remains in a POC stage for most of the organizations. So what do we do? Okay, Let me introduce you with the TestNG framework. So TestNG is a testing framework inspired from JUnit in Java and NUnit in .NET, but introducing new functionalities that make it more powerful and easier to use. It is an open source automated testing framework and is similar to JUnit, especially when testing integrated classes. And it eliminates most of the limitation of the older frameworks and gives the developer the ability to write more flexible and powerful tests with the help of easy annotations, grouping, sequencing, and parameterizing. So there are multiple benefits, but from Selenium perspective, major advantages are it gives ability to produce HTML reports of execution. Annotations are very useful for testers. The test cases can be grouped and prioritized. So now you can create like hundreds of test cases, but you can group them like these 20 test cases are for my sanity. And I will run all the 100 test cases as part of my regression when the sanity is completed. So this grouping feature is a very good feature of TestNG, and you can prioritize it more. Okay, even in the regression test cases, these test cases are like P0s and the rest are P1s or P2s. Parallel testing is possible, which we were struggling in the stage 3, 4, and 5. So this generates logs as well. So TestNG logs are there. And data parameterization, you don't need to write code for Excel and anything else. You can give the data over here. The framework takes care of it. So typically, the TestNG, we have a TestNG XML which contains a suite, some test cases with parameters, some classes. And inside the classes annotation, we have different class. And when we execute it, we give TestNG jars to it. It creates with the help of some TestNG classes, which have annotations before test, at test, after test in each class. This gets added with test data, and if the test data is multiple, like you are providing a series of test data, so suppose you have providing an array of 5 different test data, so the same test ng class gets executed in parallel for 5 different test data, and it performs actions, and then you get an HTML report. So let me begin with the annotations of TestNG framework. Before suit, then before test, before class, before methods, at the rate test. So this is actually what we look for, the test. But we get a number of other annotations as well to use. So suppose we can define at before class at a single place, and before every class it will my same code will be executed. I don't need to call it again and again. So suppose you want to invoke the driver before every method, or maybe before every class, or before every test, and after every test you want to close it. So all these things can be done in these annotations. Then we have got the groupings. So suppose there's one test for a car. I can give it a group car. I have another test for car, and then I have some tests for a scooter. I'll mention the test group is scooter over here. Another test for a scooter, again group is scooter, and I have another test for a sedan. So sedan is a sedan car as well as it is a car. So now we can ask TestNG to run the group, the car group. So it will then run car 1, car 2, and sedan. Suppose I want to run the scooter group, then it will run the scooter 1 method and the scooter 2 method for the test methods. So this ways we can categorize my tests in different groups, and we can ask the TestNG framework to run one or multiple groups at a point of time. So this gives a depends on capability as well. So suppose I have a sign in method which executes the sign in, and I have mentioned that this sign in method depends on open browser. So open browser is another test defined in the same class, and then there's a logout test which depends on sign in. So as TestNG first tries to go to execute the test methods in an alphabetical manner. So if you want your tests to depend on another test cases, or you want open browser to be a prerequisite of sign in and sign in to be a prerequisite of logouts, you can use the depends on method. So this ways it will execute the open browser method first because it has no dependencies, and as the open browser method is completed, then it will execute sign in, and at the end it will execute logout method. Sequencing and prioritizing. Okay. So in every test we can mention, okay, what is the priority? So this is the test case number 1, test case number 2, 3 and 4. But if I change the priority, so I don't know that which methods will be executed first. So if I give it the priority, so it will index on basis of the priority keyword, and it will execute the first test case, then the second, third, and then the fourth. So suppose you want to skip some of the test cases that are maybe for some time it's not necessary, but you don't want to delete that part of code. So we can say, okay, so there's priority 0, there's priority 1, and there's priority 2, but this is enabled equal to false. So the test case number 3 will not be executed, even if it has a priority of 2, which is greater than priority of 3, but still 1, 2, and 4 will be executed, and 3 will be skipped. So moving to another aspect of TestNG, which we all need, is parameterization. So there's an method to provide data parameterization, and this data parameterization is the basis of parallel testing as well. So suppose I have a test case where I have to authenticate with some username and password, and I want to test some of the boundary values and some of the positive as well as the negative scenarios. So I can create a data provider. So in my @test, I will annotate my test with a data provider named authentication. And in the same class, I will create a 2D array of objects which will have the same name as authentication. So when this test will be executed, it will take its signatures, method signature, like username and password, from the authentication data provider, which is defined in a static credentials method, which returns an object array, a 2D object array. So for the first iteration, it will use test user underscore 1 and password will test @123. For the second iteration, it will use test user underscore 2 and some other password. So the same test case will get executed 2 times. And if we want to execute it in parallel, so we have to define it in the suit, which I'll be covering in the next slide. And the same test case will be executed with 2 different data credentials in parallel. So now how is cross browser achieved? Okay, so this is multiple browser. So using the same data parameterization, I will say, okay, there is a before class, and before test, I need a parameter browser. So when I got a before test browser, now I can say, okay, if browser dot equals or content equals Chrome, then open Chrome driver. If browser dot uh, content equals Firefox, then open Firefox driver. If browser dot content equals Internet Explorer, then open IE driver. Once the driver object is set, I'm done. My test case will follow. So here is a sample TestNG XML. The suit name is suit. Parallel is none as of now. I'll talk about this parallel feature in a few minutes. But here are two tests I have created. One is Firefox test. Second is Internet Explorer test. So in the Firefox test, there is a parameter whose name is browser, which is defined inside the test in before test method annotation, whose value is Firefox. And class name is multi-browser. So class name over here is multi-browser. In the second test, the parameter name is Internet Explorer and the class name is the same, multi-browser. So the same class will be called twice, once with Firefox as the value and second IE test as a value. What happens in parallel test? Same parameters, I take it as a data parameter, string browser. Here the same thing, just the parallel equal to test. So my two of my test classes will run in parallel. So when we run this method, this TestNG class, I should see at the same instance two browsers are opening and working in parallel. One is Firefox and second is Internet Explorer, because now I have directed TestNG to run the tests in parallel. And here I can say while writing the code, I have mentioned private WebDriver driver. So here I have not used the static method. So the multi-browser class, this will be invoked twice in the Java system memory, and in two different classes, this private WebDriver driver, the driver variable will be having two different instances inside each classes, and my parallel testing will not interfere as we have seen in the stage 5 in the last few slides. Now I've got another problem: how to dynamically choose mobiles or browsers. So here in cross-browser or parallel testing example, we have seen that we have hard-coded the browser values, Firefox and Internet Explorer. Suppose there's a requirement that I need to choose the browsers dynamically, or my program should find out how many browsers are available in a particular machine and execute all. Or maybe we are using some cloud providers. In that case, how many browser versions or maybe mobile devices that are available that I need to execute. So I cannot write them in the testng.xml. Okay, I'll explain. So there is a gem. No, there's a hidden gem in testng that is not covered in most of the blogs or documents. So testng is equal to new testng. So what I can do, instead of writing my testng.xml, I can write it as a Java program. So XML suit equal to new XML suit. I can set the name. Then XML test equal to new XML test. I assign it to a suit. Can set the name of the test. I can add some classes. Classes.add new com.mycompany.test.signup.login.logout. So I have added three test classes, and in the test I will set the XML classes as this classes object. And now list of suits, I'll add the suit and testng equal to new testng, where I'll set the XML suits. So testng will contain my suits will contain my test, my test will contain my classes, and my classes will contain the before methods annotation, actors annotation, after methods annotation, after class annotation. And whenever I set tng.run, so that this testng variable will get executed. And now here I can write a program. Okay, I can write a for loop to get all the available browsers, and I can add as many data parameters or classes that I need to run. So this makes my life much more easier. So how do we do it in pCloudy? So let's see through a video. So we have our sample projects in GitHub. These sample projects contain some Appium samples for connecting with pCloudy in Java, .NET, now in Ruby, as well as Python and Node.js. So the repository contains for some examples from beginners as well as for some advanced users as well. So they are, for getting started, we have 3 chapters with Android, TestNG, and a native app on single device without pCloudy. Chapter 2 and 3 are with pCloudy, and then chapter 4 to 12 are for advanced users. They contain mostly for parallel testing with TestNG, and then parallel testing with stage 5 that we were talking about without TestNG but with Java multi-threadings. So I will download here in the video. I will download the files. So you can also clone the repository. So here I'll just download the zip. Show in folder. So in my download section, I've got a pCloudy samples project. I will extract it. So we have all the projects in it. Now we can go to Java to import all these projects. So this is the whole repository. You can also git clone it if you are aware of GitHub, and that is a better way of doing it, as we keep on releasing some more and more sample codes for other languages, and we keep on increasing Java's as well. So here all the chapters we are importing in Eclipse and creating in a single working set. So all these projects are like these all are Maven projects, Maven dependencies. So I will start with one project, and it says that there's a pCloudy connector jar which is missing. So we have a connector jar. We have still not published it in Maven Central, but we can download it from the same GitHub repository and run a single Maven command to install it in our local Maven repository so that the Eclipse takes care of it. So I've downloaded the pCloudy Java connector jar. We'll go to a download section and then I'll run the command. Okay, so Maven was not set up in this machine. So in Windows, I can install Maven through some procedures. So here I'll just make sure how to install Maven so that you can install the pCloudy connector jar. So there's a Maven open build. You don't need to install it. You can just extract it and paste it somewhere and set the Java paths, the Maven home path, the repository path, and in your path variable, and you are done. Maven is set up in your Windows machine. If you are using a Linux or Mac machine, then you can install it by sudo apt-get, or in Mac by brew or cast. And on the same website, the procedure for installing it in your Linux or Macintosh machine is given. So here I am adding a path as eDrive Apache Maven. So now when I yeah, in Java home as well, I'll set the Java home path, and now when I run the Maven command mvn, it gives me some error, which means Maven is set up properly. Now I will copy this command, and I can see the pCloudy Java connector is already present. So I will paste this command, and the Maven repositories. Then my local M2 repository, this file, this jar will be added. So now I'll need to go to Maven again and update the project. Uh, yeah, now I can see the error has gone. Okay, so now there were two more errors. One was for the pCloudy, for connecting to pCloudy, we have exposed some REST APIs that needs your email address and your API key that we can get from the account settings section. So this is my username and my access key. Sorry for the trouble, guys. I'm seeing some network issues over here. I'm lowering the HD quality. That might help. Although this video is also available in YouTube, so we will share the link of this video after the session. So here, same thing, we have added the classes in the suite and added the suite in the TestNG, my TestNG in line number 44. And now we have created the connector object for pCloudy. Here we are authenticating the user. We are giving a session name. We are booking the devices. And then for each devices, we are adding the tests. And here we are randomly choosing 3 devices with minimum version of 5 and a maximum version of 7. And there's a web Appium test. So we are here, we are creating the device context and setting up the capabilities. So the capabilities object will differ for each and every devices. And now I'll set the thread count to whatever devices are booked and set it in parallel. And then I'll say in the test class, which extends test setup, the test setup has my before test and before class. So in before test, I'm just creating the report objects and setting up the snapshots folder. In before class, we are trying to create the driver object. Then in the @test, we are trying to open google.com, searching pCloudy in it, clicking the button, and then we are taking the screenshot. And we are also adding in this in a report scripting framework that is presented with the same pCloudy connector jar that we added in the Maven recently. You can also use extent reports. That is a very good reporting tool in addition to the TestNG reports that is generated. So on running it, it has randomly selected three devices from pCloudy, and I can go into the pCloudy view and see it in the live view section. So Motorola, Moto G, HTC, and Lenovo device it has selected. So these all the three devices are here for us, and the test has begun. pCloudy, it has searched. Okay, one device was locked, so I'll enable interaction and I will just open it up so that I can see the test running in Chrome in the backend. Yeah, so and the data was parameterized, so the same test scripts will run two times because two or three times we have added the same class. And as soon as a run is completed on one device, that device will be removed from the live view so that your remaining credits, pCloudy credits, are reverted back. And you can check the reports that have been generated. So these are the HTML reports that we generate. So in HTC1, this is the consolidated report that I was talking about. And this is the single report with all the snapshots and everything. So if there's a failure, we can see, okay, the pCloudy website didn't open on this device. Same failure on here as well. So yeah, here it is passed because the link was successful. And now we can also go to the automation reports section and see the performance reports as well as the session videos and the logs, the device logs as well as the Appium logs for all the devices. This is maintained with pCloudy. You get all the Appium logs and the performance reports and the session videos as well. And these are the device logs as well. So in case of Android, it is ADB logcat, and in case of iOS, that is ISIS log, iDevice logs or something, some utility. I forgot it. And for every device, you will get the complete session video as well, and what was the CPU, what was the memory, what was the battery. And this is an older video that I'm playing, and now we have enhanced our capabilities and the website's look and feel, and now you get some even better reports with all the battery, the CPU, and the memory profiles and the frame rendering data as well as the network utilized. So you can choose the devices from either you can choose multiple devices from the console, you can choose them from randomly between some versions, you can choose them with their device full names if you already got, or you can get some prioritized devices if you want, whatever we suggest. So I think I'm done with the PPT over here, and now let us have the question and answer session. So guys, you can use the questions feature in the go to webinar control panel to give your questions, and I'll try to answer as many of them as possible. Okay, so is this TestNG framework specific to Java or it is language independent? Uh, no, this TestNG is specific to Java, but for other languages as well, like for .NET, there's NUnit, and we have recently added in our sample projects a similar project to uh, similar project so that you can dynamically choose devices or browsers and run them on .NET. And I'm sure in any other languages as well, you will be getting one thing or the other in the testing framework. So TestNG is a unit test framework. So you can search for, suppose in Python, you can Google about unit testing framework in Python, and you will get some similar stuff over there. Okay, so I've got another question from Appium Maven project unable to run on real device. That is already in a Stack Overflow question. So maybe we can come into that later. I cannot open a Stack Overflow as of now. Is there any way to run parallel tests against BDD frameworks? Yes, there are BDD frameworks as well, which helps you run parallel tests. One such framework is Opkey, that is a part of Smart Solutions offering again. So in Opkey, you can write your tests in BDD and you can execute those tests in parallel on multiple devices. And if you are already using Cucumber as a framework, so there should be, of course, there should be ways to run it in parallel. So everything that depends upon how thread safe you have written your code. And suppose you want to merge over here the BDD framework and the TestNG framework, something should be there, of course. You have to Google it out. Or apart from TestNG, you can also write your BDD runner so that it runs in parallel. How to execute the same without using pCloudy on real devices? Okay, so whatever example was there before the videos, uh, you can execute the same thing in your local devices as well without pCloudy. So suppose you have connected 5 devices, so you can execute ADB command to get the information of about those 5 devices or whatever devices are connected in your ADB devices list, and you can then have a for loop to add all those devices in your TestNG, in your dynamic TestNG XML creation, and then as explained in the video, instead of using the pCloudy devices, you can run it on your local devices as well. So in the pCloudy sampler projects, I think the chapter 2 that we have, that is regarding the same on local devices in parallel without pCloudy. So let me just cross check it. pCloudy sample GitHub. Okay, so I will go to the Java section. The Java section, I've got the getting started, and then there's yes, pCloudy Appium on single devices, pCloudy Appium on multiple devices. Okay, this is pCloudy Appium, but if you change the local, if you merge the code of chapter 1 and chapter 3, you will get multiple devices with local devices over here. Okay, moving on to the next question. How many devices we can run the tests on pCloudy in parallel? Okay, so here we are talking about two different scenarios. So how many tests can we run in parallel in TestNG? So virtually there's no limit. So if that is a unit test, you can, which consumes very less amount of RAM, you can uh, run like thousands of test cases in parallel with TestNG framework. But if the question is specifically on pCloudy, so personally I have tested on 48 devices, I guess, the last time I did a POC for a customer. I have tested on 48 devices personally, Android devices in parallel. And because I was using this TestNG framework, so there was a single Java process that was running in the backend. Obviously, it was creating 48 different driver instances in the memory, but as the Appium classes and the Java TestNG classes, they were only getting loaded once in the Java memory, so it was not a problem. So I was not getting any spikes. Perfecto also provides flexibility to plug in Appium. So what advantage we have over Perfecto in pCloudy? Okay, so that is a long question. I think we can we do have a comparison with Perfecto and other mobile cloud device providers as well, and we can share it with you for the same. Is performance testing offered by pCloudy? Okay, so while you do a manual or an automation test in pCloudy, we capture the performance of the mobile with respect to the CPU, memory, battery, frame rendering, and the network as well. There's also an option in pCloudy to simulate your network. So suppose you want to check your application for network performances, so that simulation can also be done. So for the first 5 minutes, you can check your application in a very good 4G LTE network. Then you can suddenly switch it back to a 2G edge network. Then you can come back to the 3G, all with clicks of devices from the UI, or if you are running automation, then through APIs, and your application gets those simulated networks. So in a case, yes, performance testing is offered by pCloudy to provide data which is better to maintain Excel or data provider class. So this is a tricky question. No, I'll not say it's tricky. It depends. So if you have some data which can be kept inside the Excel, the inside the Java framework, then it's always better to keep it in the data provider class. But if you want your data to be manipulated by some manual testers or someone who doesn't know Java or Eclipse, who is not familiar with Eclipse, then in that scenario, it is always better to keep your data outside your Java program with within some CSV files or maybe a normal text file, or better in an Excel file. But here's a catch. In your data provider class, what you can do, you can read your Excel files, and then your data is actually kept in Excel, but you are also using TestNG's data provider class, which while returning a 2D object array, it is actually reading the Excel file or the CSV file and generating the 2D object array. Then depending upon your data, your test will now can be integrated with TestNG to run in parallel. So suppose in your Excel file you have 4 rows, so TestNG will run the same test on 4 devices. If you have 8 rows, so it will run on 8 devices. So now you can combine, by this you can combine the data provider class as well as the Excel. Okay, so someone is new to Appium, help with the best tutorials for Appium with Java. So I'll suggest you to start by installing Appium on your local device and try it on an Android device with a simple native application. So there are now lots and lots of tutorials available. So if needed, you can start with the pCloudy guide for local devices, which is chapter 1, as I have already categorized it from chapter 1 to chapter 14. So 14 are for advanced users. So chapter 1 is for beginners. So you can begin with chapter 1 and then you can execute them on local or pCloudy. And you can always sign up on pCloudy for free. and you will get 100 free credits, and you can use that for your tests. Is local bridge networking supported by pCloudy? Is it suppose networks restricted apps to be executed on pCloudy cloud device? Okay, so the answer is yes and no. So pCloudy have two modes, where one is the public cloud that we are using and one is the private cloud. So in private cloud mode, the whole pCloudy lab is set up inside your own organization in your premises. So in that case, on the pCloudy devices, it uses your own network and your local applications will be executed. But if you are using the public cloud, then by default, these your private applications, your private network is not supported. But yes, we have already enabled VPN in all of our devices, so you can use a VPN to connect to it, to your own private network, set up the private network and use the devices. I personally know some of the customers who are already doing it. So there are some applications, there are some customers who use applications which are region dependent. So and they need their own network to update the app before they launch. So yes, they are already using it on our public setup as well as on the private setup. On public setup by the VPN setup. Can we get the results captured in Excel from the reports generated if we are maintaining data in Excel and reading into data provider, like one to one mapping of data and results? Yes, you can get it, but sorry, that TestNG doesn't support it by default. You have to write your own result reporting framework to help you with that scenario. So I know two Java libraries that already helps in reading and writing from and to Excel. One is Apache POI and second is JXL. So I think the time is over. I'll still try to take a few more questions. Can we do profiling of apps on pCloudy? So I think there's the same questions I have already answered. It's like performance testing profiling. So yes, that can be done. You get some network profile and the CPU profile, but if you want to do a real profiling, like you want to add some start some profiling tool, then we have a feature where we can bring the remote devices to your local computer. We call that as USB bridging. So we can select the you can use the pCloudy platform to select any devices which is maybe in India, in US, and bring them over here in your local machine, and that will be visible in your ADB devices list, and you can use some of other tools and like Neotis profiler or anything else if you want some detailed analysis. What is good practice of set up the automation framework for API, mobile and web? Okay, so if you want to have a single automation framework for API testing, mobile testing and web testing, then I'll ask you to look into OpKey. That is a single framework that is also offered as a SaaS pay as per you use plan, and you can use it for testing your REST or SOAP APIs. You can use it for mobile devices, both for local and on pCloudy, both for Android and iOS. And then on web platforms, we have like close to 500 plus keywords on it. And it also helps you test your database, and it also provides BDD, Gherkin features, and some more. So why don't you go to the OpKey websites and read more about it. How can we test app with low battery status on pCloudy devices? Okay, yeah. So we provide in pCloudy, we allow you to execute ADB commands. So with ADB commands, you can turn off the charging of the devices while you are using. So then in the USB will be connected, but still the charging will stop. So this is how we capture the battery data while your sessions are on. So we stop the charging of the devices. So in this case, you can simulate a low battery event and then run your test cases to see what happens when there are unexpected battery pop-ups and what happens when your battery goes less than 10%. Is your application behaving normally, or there's a hike in CPU? Or you, even if you don't do that, you just do a normal application test, you can keep on seeing, okay, with the depletion of battery, what is the effect of your CPU usage and the memory usage. So guys, I have to stop the session as we are not uh, left with more time over here. So for rest of the questions, I'll try to get back personally on every one of them. Thank you for attending the session. Have a good day. Bye.